I'm going to ask each of our panelists here to give a brief, and I mean brief, introduction of yourselves, and please mention something that has nothing to do with education, because depending on how this goes, that may be all you have left. So we'll start at the end of the row with you, Bijal.
Awesome. I'm Bijal Shah, the CEO of Guild. Guild works with large employers to help upskill and reskill their workforce. We play in the workforce development space. And something you should know that is not related to education is that I have no idea. I have 2 kids, a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, and I left very early this morning, and they were sad that I walked out the door.
James Rhyu, I'm the CEO at Stride. Our primary property is a company called K-12. K-12 provides full-time online learning here in the U.S. predominantly. And I also have a son who's just turned 20 this past weekend.
All right.
Alex Peng, I'm the president and CFO of TAL Education. I think we're what we call ourselves a smart learning solutions provider for K-12. So it spans from in-person tutoring all the way to digital content and digital learning devices. We're founded in China. Now we're in more than 10 countries. Something about me, I have a hobby, which is fixing pocket watches, something that may not be replaced by AI anytime soon.
All right.
Great to see you guys all here. I'm Caren, CEO of Turnitin, which is historically focused on enforcing academic integrity in universities, in research journals, and in high schools, mainly around writing. We've really now diving deep into how to help have AI be a positive, net positive on student learning outcomes and have students be able to graduate from college knowing how to use AI in their job, but not using AI to get through college in ways that teachers don't want. So we're in the middle of that right now, and it's been really rewarding, and it's going well. And then my advice, I'm on the board of the Ironman triathlon company, and I'm not a young kid, but I did my first one about a month ago, and it was like far and away the most exhilarating athletic accomplishment of my career. And if you guys do it, you can do it. You need 7 hours a week to train, but it is a total rush, and you're never too old unless you're not able to walk, I guess. So highly recommend the sport.
Okay, did not expect that, Chris, thanks. So I was going to structure this as a, kind of a sober discussion of managing growth in volatile economic, political, social times, talk about AI, et cetera. But I think it's time at the end of lunch where we thrive on chaos a little bit. So let me pose my first question. This is, ASU+GSV is 15 years old. It kind of born with ed tech. And the idea was to drive better outcomes for students, for learners, for adults through technology applied to education. The statistics do not tell a great story in terms of the success of that endeavor. So the question is, how is what we have done to education with ed tech, the story of ASU+GSV, the 10 billion or so that we've invested, is that not a story of failure? And if it's not, why not? And I'll start with you, James, because you inspired me to ask that question.
Well, I think we're doing a pre-call, and I sort of posed this question, which I've posed now to probably, I think probably thousands of people to this point. Over the past 10 years, specific to K through 12 education, in the U.S., we've invested over $10 billion, I think, as Richard mentioned, in startup companies. And in those 10 years, for the startup companies that are founder-led, started in the past 10 years, they all had business plans that were supposed to make them more than $100 million of revenue. They wouldn't get funded without that. And is there a single one founded in the past 10 years selling to K through 12 school districts, invested by VCs, that makes more than $100 million of revenue? And I think the answer to the question, Richard, is the answer to my question, which is, I think it's really been an abject failure over the past 10 years to drive innovation within the K through 12 ecosystem. And that's just one proxy of that. But I really think that with all the capital that's been deployed, we have had very little result for it. And if you think about it, I used to say there's 3 industries in the US that really need disruption: healthcare, the government, and education. Now, whether we like it or not, the first 2 seem like they're getting disrupted. We may not like it, but that's happening. But I think the third one, education, really is ripe for disruption. And really, Richard, as you posed the question, focusing on what are the outcomes we're looking for, because I think we've lost sight of the outcomes we're even looking for.
Richard, if I may.
Absolutely.
We haven't been operating much in the US in the last 10 years, so I couldn't specifically comment on that question. But there's something yesterday I shared on the AI show stage, which may in part explain what is the underlying cause of this observation we had. I think, you mentioned healthcare, government, and education. So the government, the Constitution was ratified, 1787 or so, if my US history still serves me right. So, but the current school system, the compulsory education for K-12, it was even earlier than that. It was 1760 or something in Prussia. So it's like an almost 300-year-old system that is trying to serve kids that are native to the artificial intelligence age. And I think that's just like the fundamental challenge, right? You have this pre-industrial age model where you have teachers, classrooms, standard curriculum, everybody going through that. It does a lot of good things. It actually brought basic level education at scale, somewhat affordable. But I think we're just living in a fundamentally different age. That system by itself, I think is just unlikely to create the outcome that we all love to see for our kids. I'm not saying completely get rid of it. There may be that discussion going on in this country, but by itself, it just feels it's not living up to the age anymore.
You talked about an outcome that was financial or economic in value, and I wonder if we're spending enough time talking about the academic outcome that is really important.
That was the direction of the original question.
Yeah.
But I think that they happen to be correlated. They're not necessarily need to be correlated. But I think we all know the academic outcomes in this country have declined. They've been on a pretty steady decline for many years. And at a time when I would argue investment's increasing, and at a time when the rest of the industries in this country are evolving rapidly. And so when you have stagnant to declining outcomes, when the other industries in this country are actually improving on their outcomes, there happens to be this correlation, I think, between sort of investment outcomes and academic outcomes.
James, let's let Bijal make her comment because I think it'll be.
I actually agree with you. What I'm saying is that you look at economic outcomes, that's one indicator that there's trouble or some issue. The second issue, in my opinion, is what are the actual outcomes for academic outcomes look like inside the United States in particular. We were just talking backstage about other countries, including China and India as well, in terms of where the focus is in the US versus where the focus is in some of those other countries. And I would say, like, net, you're right. It looks like we've gotten worse, not better. And then my question would be, great, can we segment what has actually happened with those dollars? Because some of those dollars, as Jonathan just said in the last panel, you're not going to have a 100% hit rate. So you have to assume a 54%, I think is what he said, hit rate on what's going to happen. Can you look across that and figure out where are there key areas where you've actually seen a lot of progress and double down in those areas? I don't play in the K through 12 space, so I'm not sure, but that is something that I think would be super helpful.
Chris?
I think technology can have a positive impact, but it's definitely nowhere near a solve for the negative declining trend in student outcomes in K-12. I think competition is very good. It makes everyone better. I think student mindset has shifted dramatically since COVID, where it's just about get me the grade, and how can I spend the least amount of time doing the work to get the grade and get the degree, versus value the learning. And that's on the parent, I think, to help the student value learning and the importance of it. It's really off the rails right now in terms of
Okay,
top
well,
in the world spending and way below average outcomes.
that sounds like healthcare. But let's answer a slightly different angle on that question, which is there a leap that we can take if knowledge is being commodified by AI? In other words, there's nothing anyone needs to know anymore. And thinking, starting now, is going to be commodified by AGI, by artificial general intelligence. What exactly should we be teaching or training or testing?
Yeah, I gave a talk to the Notre Dame Board of Directors last week, and my take at least is you're right. You don't have to be an expert anymore. Experts available to help you, but you need to have great interpersonal skills, great communication skills, know how to work in teams, be creative.
Are we teaching any of those things?
No, we're not. So my point to the Notre Dame board was you got to redesign your curriculum to have all these things be the focus, and also graduate AI literate folks to go into the workforce. But that's what needs to change, and it's dramatic for a college to be relevant in this new age, in my opinion.
Richard, if I may, I think the way you think about this is we should think about it totally different from a calculator. A calculator does that one thing so much more superior than a human being can do. But this is very different. It can actually elevate the ceiling of creativity, of critical thinking, of the ability of a kid to do many things that we adults today would not even be thinking possible. So I think the skills like curiosity, just the passion and drive and motivation to ask even the first single question to AI. I found that actually to be the hardest, sometimes to trigger a child to say, they probably were doing some other things that you were trying to detect. But if you actually put them in front of a screen, say, here's a text window, type in a question, that becomes the harder thing, what question am I going to ask? But it's really that if we can, as teachers, as educators, just instill that little bit of motivation and passion to ask the question.
Right, and Bijal, it looked like you had something on the training side here.
I was just going to say, I think to Chris's point, investing in problem solving, critical thinking, interpersonal skills is super important. You asked, but are we actually investing in those things? We had a conversation about how in other countries, hard skills are the real focus. And I think as we think about the future, no, our K through 12 education system, even our higher education system, I think needs a lot of work to ensure that we are focused on both hard skills and then the soft skills of connection, empathy, the ability to lead and influence other individuals. But I actually think in order for us to be able to live in an augmented world with AI, we desperately need the ability to ensure that people are better critical thinkers. They know how to solve problems. They know how to use frameworks. They know how to use that technology to ideate and innovate in ways that I don't think we've seen in many centuries.
Right, and I think that's going to go to my next question, which is to turn that issue into an economic issue, because already in the industry, we've seen more than just signs that AI, when applied to knowledge industries, can turn mountains into molehills. I'm a board member of Chegg, and we've sort of seen what's happened with that company through cheap or free AI. Not that it'll be cheap or free forever, but it is for now. And then when we see AGI coming on, it'll just bulldoze those molehills potentially. So my question is, what kind of enterprise survives this onslaught, this unique onslaught, this moment that we're in best? What are the characteristics of that enterprise? And then we'll all invest in those enterprises. So Chris?
I'm bullish on two-year programs because they're a lot more affordable, because I think that the level of student debt is just criminal. Students aren't even, people graduating college 12 years ago with student debt have on average more debt 12 years later than they had when they graduated. So the economics of a four-year degree are just really under question unless it's a very, very top program. I think 2 years is going to get you the skills you need with AI to be a high-impact worker. So that's one big thing, I believe. The ability for a university to reinvent itself is incredibly hard to imagine. As Mark Andreessen gave a podcast and said, even turning around a restaurant is close to impossible. Like, when have you got no restaurants that's below average all of a sudden is excellent? Never in my experience. So his point is the ability for universities, basically with the power of faculty, to reinvent themselves is very hard. So my thought there is probably more upstart institutions like University of Austin, which don't have the legacy, hopefully become more available for more students going forward, because I think the ability for the established institutions to reinvent themselves is a long shot.
And anyone else have any views of enterprises that you think kind of are?
Yeah, if I may. And this also has something to do with, Richard, your prior question. I think we're focusing too much on teaching, what to teach, how we teach. And a few weeks ago, we asked a question internally at the company, like, if the students are going to know more than the teachers, how do we teach a class? But that's actually not a problem. It's how we help them learn more. It's focusing on learning. I think first, that's the mission. Is our mission teaching? Well, we know teaching based on our authority as teachers or helping students to learn. The second thing is the company itself. If it wants to be a learning solution provider, it better be able to learn on its own, like learn very different things. I think we in the last few years went from in-classroom teaching, online teaching, we learned about digital and print publishing, digital devices, all in the span of the last 3 years. It's all by teachers who learned and adapted, and I think that's really important. And the last thing I would say is, I think this needs to happen at the top. You're going to hear a lot of people say we're going to be all in on AI, this and that, but if people at the top of the company are not like there, working with AI, coding and doing whatever it is, with AI themselves, it's very, very hard to comprehend where this is going. You're just going to be like talking at a distance about this future.
I think for me, most of the panelists have already said the word, but it's really skills. I think that's the thing that I'd be investing in now. I think the concept's already starting to deteriorate where, there's sort of, you graduate high school and you go to college, and it's college that gives you the sort of the ability to go on and get a job. We're seeing a lot of large technology companies already break down the walls of, no college degree required. So I think it's really investing in skills. I think that's what the kids need, is us to be investing in their skills. And I think that the companies that are going to be able to really promote skills learning, starting at younger ages. Like, I think we keep having this paradigm of, they're going to learn skills in college. I think most of us probably would say that we don't really actually use a lot of what we learned in college in our jobs. So I think it's really the investment in skills to me.
Oh, you really set up Bijal there, don't you?
I know. Except what I will say is that I actually think the most important skill to learn is the most important skill you need is the ability to learn. So to just go back to what Alex said, I think the organizations that will win are the ones who focus on learning for themselves and disrupting themselves. Organizations that are focused on actually teaching others, whether it's K through 12, whether it's adult working learners, whether it's seniors, on the ability to learn. And I think that that is what our society is going to need go forward, because we're going to have this divide happen in society where you're going to have people who really understand the fundamental concepts of how things work, and they can be innovative and creative and problem solve. Like, think about the Leonardo da Vinci's of the world and that era coming back, but being able to manifest in your head what the future looks like and then use these amazing tools to help make them happen. Or you're going to have the trades aspect of things that need to happen and the ability to teach people how to learn and continue to learn in society. Those are the organizations that are going to win.
I totally agree, and I would also, just to compare notes, would say technology probably has a very limited role to play there. It's really great teachers who can motivate and inspire you to want to learn, and hopefully parents play a big role there as well. So despite being in a technology company, education, I think that what you're describing is a big problem, and I think it's mostly a human-to-human problem to solve.
Yeah,
By the way, I almost want to redefine the word teacher. It's like a co-learner. I mean, I think in the future you're going to have the adult and the student learn something together. It's just, this is just
It's also changing the modality of learning to more hands-on learning, to more problem solving and testing what you're doing. It is turning the way we think about learning on its head to some degree to drive, like if people focused on the outcome of how are you driving curiosity, I think we'd be in a much better spot. And maybe that's correlated to economic outcomes. I mean, I think in the long run it might be, but you might not actually see those outcomes in the short term.
Right, and I think we will see some transformations in assessment as a result of those changes you just described. And is there anything that you're seeing, because you're as close to anyone in at least higher ed assessment?
Yeah, I think so. One, assessment's growing in importance, and work you do at home is, whether it's an essay, a problem set, a computer program, is becoming less important for your final grade, at least. So they're not trusting that that work is being done authentically at home, and it largely, sadly, is not. So assessment becomes more important. AI-proof assessment becomes very important. So it means taking tests in environments where you can't easily get around to another device or access another web page to get support. So we are getting asked by customers to make whatever kind of test it might be, whether it's writing an essay in class, taking a multiple choice test, doing a short answer, to be on a device that is much less prone to having AI show up where it shouldn't. For example, we have the similar technology. We've delivered bar exams for years for would-be lawyers. Similar technology, but it's going to, I think, show it's up in
I think
the classroom.
this shows a little bit of the short-sightedness. If you were really looking at it from a different lens, you'd say, hey, if a kid isn't using, or if a potential lawyer isn't using AI, that's a problem. Figure out whether they're using it correctly or not is what you really want to do. But let's go on to a different issue, which is, and I'll pose this to the group, we have a panel that's particularly expert to answer this question. Can a major education company be truly international? Can we see, maybe for the first time, a truly global education company, or is that impossible? Why or why not? I think you will all have views on that.
I would just say I think Khan Academy probably is the best candidate today. Can't speak for how multilingual they are, but AI will solve that.
Khan Academy, okay.
Well, I have to say yes, absolutely.
Yes, I know. I set it up for you.
I know. I mean, look, I think all the barriers we used to think were really, really hard to break down in education. Content awareness, cultural awareness, language barriers, all these things, they're breaking down by AI. They're just like, we're seeing it literally, this minute, right? A team, let's say in Beijing, will be able to create, with the help of AI, the highest quality English language-based material, education content. I'm not worried about that. Now, I'm not going to here to comment on the different policies. I think that's, let's assume that's not a prohibitive barrier. I think, today you see even the most complex type of services business model can be, established across borders. We see many examples of these. All the different technology are making that possible. And I think fundamentally, that's also where you're going to have, you're going to help solve some of the economic issues, the affordability of providing services to kids in many parts of the country. The world needs this kind of international supply chain of teaching resources, of content resources, and so on.
Yeah, I think a short answer is yes, and I think it's, again, it sort of focuses back on skills because, in sort of the more traditional model of education, it is somewhat dependent upon local regulation, sort of local policy, local culture, whereas when you focus from the angle of skills, I think it sort of breaks a lot of those down. A lot of the skills sort of cross borders and things like that. And so I think from the angle of skills, you can be a dominant education company that has, an international footprint. And I think you're starting already to see some of those skill-based companies now, and we're not one of them, but there are some sort of skill-based companies that have I think you have a pretty international footprint that that focus on skills.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think for a lot of companies, if they can get a common lexicon across their workforce, you then run into a world where they can utilize that information to decide how to drive learning development, workforce development across their global workforce, which then means for a provider like us who's talking to multinational companies, we are having conversations about what does your global workforce need. We can then take that back to the academic institutions we work with to say, here are ways that you could actually drive utilization of your curriculum outside of the US markets. And AI just fuels, fire on that with the ability to drive translation, to make things more contextually relevant, to drive personalization. There are a lot of benefits it provides that allow for that to happen, I think, in a more accelerated fashion than it would happen otherwise.
Okay, fair enough. So here's another one of a number of audience members would be interested in the answer to this question. With education becoming increasingly polarized, and I don't mean just politically, but I mean economically, to what extent are your companies forced to concentrate on wealthier populations because they can afford to pay for your services versus a larger set of populations that are, unfortunately don't have the resources to access these sort of better tools and modalities of education?
I mean, we're really lucky. We work with large employers who are invested in ensuring that they can bring along specifically frontline workers, which is where we started, in helping to upskill and reskill them. And so I do think to the notion of who's the payer in a world where you can create more payer options in the system so that one individual isn't taking on the burden, you have the ability to create access for all. And so we continue to be really grateful to our employer partners and the learning partners who are in our marketplace because we can provide something that generally for the populations we serve was something that was unattainable before their employer stepped in to help support and enable them.
Yeah, the very best use of money to improve a child's direction, grade-wise, learning-wise, is private tutoring. And private tutoring is probably the most expensive thing you could try to get. So therefore, it's not available in most of the world for most kids. Even here in the U.S., I think AI is going to change that dramatically, and not a chat bot, but actual it's probably an video avatar that is super motivating, knows what you need to learn, knows what you're good at, knows what makes you funny, and it'll be nearly free. So that, I think, is going to be the biggest positive impact AI has on education, is this global, nearly free, world's best tutor on your phone, which will have, in my opinion, a huge impact on global.
Right, and that avatar may be your grandparent or something.
You can pick it.
Yeah,
you could Barack Obama. It could be Miley Cyrus, whoever you want.
Miley Cyrus, that's an interesting reference. Okay.
Richard, if I may.
Einstein.
Richard, if I may. By the way, I think the most expensive type of education is private schools. All the way up here. It's even more expensive than private tutor, right? Because it's like really expensive. So look, I think our company in the last 2 decades has actually gone the direction of, we started with one of the more expensive choices. You take one subject for a year, it's like $1,500 for one subject for a year. We went down by 30–40% of that when we went online. So basically we can broadcast to unlimited number of kids. And then we went down even further when we started, Richard, you're familiar with this space, print and digital publishing. So basically our product can be sold for like, $50–60, that you will have the same benefit. Then with our digital device, some of my financial friends tell me that this is crazy. Basically we put into the device content that used to be sold when they were sold in class, something like $50,000. Just because we really believe that the penetration, that universal outreach to everybody who would benefit from this is so important for our education mission, but eventually also for our economic mission. We're literally seeing that we're serving kids from places where we would never be able to build a profitable learning center, but they can learn from the device, they can learn from online. So I think this is truly something I believe. Lastly, I see our CTO out there in that table. CTO Caren, he's building that universal AI tutor right now that can actually provide multi-language, on the spot, AI support across subject to anybody. Now, it's not going to replace teacher and learning completely.
Just a question, is that Miley Cyrus you're building? Understood. James?
No, yeah, I mean, I really don't have anything to add. I agree. Technology is going to drive down the price and cost for companies to deliver education, and I think it's just going to keep going down. And I think that's going to be good for society at large, and it's going to provide more access across the globe.
But Richard, may I just add one final thought?
Of course.
But I think what's going to be really most precious and could be really costly is that human in the loop. We still need the human to inspire, to give the motivation. I mean, they can be a light touch. It doesn't have to be 24 hours there with the kid, but you still, I fundamentally believe, you still need human in the loop to do that. And I think really the challenge is how do we inspire young people to get into the business of inspire another set of young people? Because I think that's really the existential challenge is that young, talented, passionate people not coming into education and learning.
Well, I think inspiration is actually the theme of my last question, which is we're coming into a world where people need to be multi-hyphenate increasingly because there'll be more time outside of whatever your career is for however you define whether you're doing an Ironman triathlon or self-actualizing some other way. And I'm wondering how each of you view the potential of this group, the potential of ASU+GSV to create things that we would define as education in a broad sense, but not in the narrow sense that we've been talking about so far. And how would you participate in that? I
can go first.
Generation.
Just as a parent, if you're working on tools that utilize AI to help a parent better engage with their children on learning and building curiosity and learning and investing more efficient time and being able to help your kids, I would be deeply inspired and interested in that. And it's partially because of what Alex said, which is the human component is going to become more and more critical. And like, as a parent, I'm the one who needs to inspire my kids and motivate them and excite them to want to learn. And so putting the tools in my hand to help do that for them and with them would be super exciting. And today it's really hard to find tools that help.
You studied the Renaissance, to be clear. Chris?
Yeah, so I think the average American worker worked 60 hours a week 100 years ago, and now it's like 35. So I'm hopeful with AI, it's not half the country out of work, but most people just work less hours and have more free time. And I, like Bijal, would definitely invest it back in teaching my kids, but also their classmates. I'd want to be a coach, guest lecturer, tutor if they'll allow me. I think most parents have a hard time tutoring kids, but like I'd put the energy and free time there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this Uberization of work, everybody doing like 5, 6 jobs, I think it's just in front of us. Like, I'm the president and CFO of the company. I also code with AI for like an hour every day, writing demos for our product teams. It's, nice. I think it's there. It's just like how you use these tools. So one of the things that I said yesterday at the AI show, we're putting this thing called beta.edu.com, which is really giving some of the tools to teachers to create new type of things. And I think, by the way, teachers are some of the best learners. As I said, most of our business leaders in our teams, in our top team, are teachers, and they're doing things that they never thought they were going to do.
No question. James, last word on this?
Yeah, I think we're out of time, but I would say, I think we have to embrace institutional change. I think that, to me, is the thing that all the participants here can really engage with and embrace institutional change. I think that's going to help the country.
Thank you, and thank you very much, panel. And thank you guys for lasting the entire lunch. This is kind of like Oprah. If you look under your seat, there'll be a certificate for a brand new Mercedes E-Class convertible. Oh no, that wouldn't be the case. All right, thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.